And we're ready whenever you are.
Good evening. So this evening we're gonna do work session number 2, and we're gonna start with the fire department. So Fire Chief Ken Stahl is going to present an update to the presentation that might look fairly familiar. Was given back in October. So.
Good evening. As Andrea stated, it's not much different than my first presentation a month ago. I'm going to just go over some updates before we get too far into it. Maybe it'll save some questions. Second slide is on the SAFER grant. Nothing's changed on the SAFER grant. The last award was 9/21/22. Only 2 New York State fire departments have received the funds. I made a phone call this week, and I've also talked to the Watertown Fire Chief. We were both given the same information. The program has been extended through 11/30/22, and it is our belief that $200 million in ARPA funds have been added to the program, and all of the applications are being regraded. Next,
the application for us, Ken?
excuse me.
Who made the application?
Don McCarthy, I believe, did it. Is the one that actually submitted it. I think Steve Jelly is actually on it as the signature. I don't have it. I actually do have it. I printed it off Facebook. Someone put it on Facebook. That's how I received a copy of it. I was recently given access to the FEMA Go website, so I can get it that way also. The original way I got it was.
You don't have a copy of the original, Ken?
I do now. I have access to the program now, but originally I had to get it off Facebook. And I know Donnie was the administrator, and Steve was the one that had signed it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So there were some modifications to my original proposal or my original presentation. Slide 3. So on the first one there, the salary line changed from 1.4 million to 1.2 million. What happened is we separated the hazard pay and gave it its own line. So that's a difference of $199,000. The next thing is specialized equipment. We changed the line from 45,000 to 25,000 during budget meetings when all the department heads got together to try to balance a budget. We're in good shape equipment wise. Some of the items that were actually suggested for us to buy were suggested by the past city manager, and it's nothing that we need right now. So I was able to reduce that. The capital equipment line was $75,000. That was a recommendation from the past city manager, which I do agree that eventually we need to start a capital equipment replacement fund. Fire trucks are not cheap. I did remove it from the line given the financial situation for this year's budget. Next is the lease expense. And on the lease expense line of my original presentation was 15,000, goes to 8,000, and I'm rounding obviously. That was to replace a command vehicle. We have a pickup truck that is in terrible shape. It's actually one I'm supposed to be driving. I'm using my POV, but I can continue to do that. So I removed that also to try to balance the budget. So that's why there's a difference in that. Next is building maintenance. I reduced that from $30,000 to $20,000. I had planned to renovate both offices, which are 18 years since any renovations have been done to the chief's office or the duty office. I had some guys at the station give me some prices. It looks like we're just going to put some paint on the walls and maybe get some new carpet now. So that is a change also. The last couple were through meeting with Angela, the police and fire retirement. During my original presentation over a month ago, she didn't have the exact numbers, so it was a estimate. So that changed as a result of getting the exact numbers for the police fire retirement. And then on the social security expense line, that changed also because of the difference in salaries.
So Social Security is a multiple number, right? Multiplying number.
I would have to direct that question to the comptroller.
So that's why that changed, because it was based on salary plus hazard pay, and now it's just based on the salary line.
But Social Security is 7.5% of salary, so about 8% for every dollar you add to salary.
I can't hear.
So the social security is a function of salary. So for every dollar you change in salary, we either add or subtract approximately 8% in social security tax. So this budget changed salary to include some additional compensation. And so as a function of that, the social security was also adjusted.
Ken, you're estimating, for building maintenance, you're estimating about 20,000 for some carpet and some fresh paint.
Well, that line also is for regular year to year building maintenance. We've had some issues with our overhead doors almost every year. Things just break all the time. So that's what that estimation is. And it's probably a little light, to be honest with you. We just had a overhead door repair that was $6,000.
Thank you.
So the most efficient is still 21.
Next slide, Kathy.
Yes, sir.
This hasn't changed. So what we're at now is 17, and it is unsustainable for the same reasons I mentioned a month ago. The amount of overtime that the firefighters are working is it just can't be sustained. They're averaging 78 hours. They will average this year 78 hours a month extra per person. The most cost effective currently would be the 21 model. I have some explanations as to why that would work. And my ideal goal would be the 25, which meets the requirements of the contract and allows us to incorporate a second row of officers, which I feel is vitally important to the department. And it may solve a lot of other issues. So with that being said, just a personnel comparison from 2019, this exact same time in 2019 compared to now. The fire department's full-time employees went from 28 to 17. Not only did we reduce the overall number of firefighters, we went from 3 fire investigators to 1. We went from 3 CPR instructors to 1. This is a typo. It's certified divers. We went from 4 to 1. Pump tester, which is what we have to test our apparatus every year. And we had it done in-house this year. I actually hired it out, but it was a cost-saving measure. Air pack technicians, instead of sending air packs, we had 2 of those. Instead of sending them out for repair, a lot of the repairs could be done in-house at no expense. We used to be an intricate part of the St. Lawrence County hazmat team. We're no longer a part of that team whatsoever. And we went from 8 hazmat technicians to 4. And the problem is with a 4-shift staff and a 5-man minimum, I can't even send people to get this training. I have many guys that will gladly go and take this training, but I have to pay them overtime to go to the training. And then I have to pay, if it's during the week and they're out of town and they were to work at night, I have to pay overtime to cover them here. So.
Are there any OSHA standards related to that, Ken, as far as having hazmat training in your building?
There's not. There is not. It's just a service that we were able to provide. As with any fire department, there's all different training that we can take. We had a confined space rescue team at one time that we did away with. We still have people trained to do it, and we can mitigate small incidents, but it would be beneficial for the department to get back to the numbers that we need for this specialized training.
How long does it take to activate a hazmat team for a potential, hazardous dwelling and or, a potential meth producing house? How long would it take for a hazmat team to be in place?
So with meth, it's a little different. Most meth calls are turned over to law enforcement, and the state police primarily handle all meth calls. We would show up as a fire department just to provide assistance. But for hazmat calls, if you sat at the intersection of 37 and 68 and you had the guidebook in front of you, which tells you what all those numbers are in the back of the trucks, it would probably scare you to know what's driving down our highways. The St. Lawrence County has reestablished a county hazmat team made up solely of volunteers. I'm not sure exactly where that stands, but I've seen on some of their Facebook pages that they are up and operational. To what level, I don't know. We were a level A response hazmat team, which means we were able to actually go in and mitigate the problem. I don't know if that's the level they're at, or they just may be able to decon, and then you would have to call a team in from like Fort Drum. I'm unsure of the information of how that team is actually operating currently.
And how many currently out of the 17 that you have are hazmat trained? All of them?
4, and I'm one of them. So 3 other than myself.
Used to be 8, Mike.
Yeah,
It
I
used to be
remember. I
8.
remember the number was bigger.
It used to be 8, and we actually had 4 that started a class and were pulled from the class.
Can Mike see the chart?
If he clicks on the handout,
Oh, Mike, if you click on the handout, you can see the
he
chart.
can
that-
follow along.
The one Andrea sent us the other day?
This is the new one.
Sir, it's attached to the actual webinar. I'm not sure where it shows on your end, but it is listed as a handout. Or I can step out and email it to you right now if you'd like.
Hang on. I just have to go to another device, that's all. No, it doesn't come with a handout. The one that, well, work session number 2?
No, sir. It would be, you're in the webinar. It would show. I'm just going to step out real quick and I will email it to you. Do you want me to move to the next one so you can talk while I'm done?
So the next slide is just some information on the overtime as a result of the staffing being at 16, other than myself. The overtime budget for this year is $655,000. This amount combines the overtime that is needed to cover the 5th man position for the entire year with the overtime that is needed to cover additional time off. That would be personal leave, sick leave, the use of back time, training time, any illness or injury, and any recall for an emergency. To put that in perspective, may seem high, the extra 200,000. We are currently this year, we are over 200,000 on that extra overtime line year to date. So I believe that is a fair estimate to use for next year. The 5th man overtime is a guarantee. The 200 is an estimation, and hopefully we don't have some of the major incidents that we had. And the fire chief last year ran things a way that I don't intend to run them. So I believe there can be some cost savings on regular overtime. Next would be the line that says time accrual payouts. It's $279,000. Anytime anyone works overtime for the contract, they're allowed to take money at time and a half, or they're allowed to put time on the books at time and a half. A lot take the time, and then at the end of the year, they get paid for it in a lump sum. So the $279,000 represents the overtime that is guaranteed just to cover every employee's vacation, holiday time off, or compensatory time off. That is a given. Next is the hazard pay. It's $200,000 roughly. This is the amount that is based on a $6 an hour requirement by the contract for all members assigned to shifts with 4 personnel. Back on one thing I did miss up at the top. We do need to modify the preliminary budget to the overtime cost of $655.
That's with 17.
That is with 17. Yeah, there was a typo in the
Can you do a
original.
comparison?
I do.
Okay. So the hazard pay, it says based on $6 an hour required, assigned to a 4-member shift. Is that always $6, or is there other things?
It is not. It
Isn't
is.
there a part-time when it goes to like 3?
It is. The hazard pay is based on a 6-man shift. So 6 members assigned to each shift. For every member below 6, it's $3 an hour. So if you go to 5, it's $3 an hour. If you go to 4, it's 6. If you decide to go to 3, it becomes $9 an hour.
So at 6 members, there's no hazard.
Correct.
5, it's $3.
That is correct.
4, 6, 3, 9.
4, it's $6.
I have a breakdown coming up if you'd like.
Oh, okay. So that'll be on there.
So I suggest for a budget modification, you hire 4 firefighters. And I know in light of the budget, it sounds crazy, but that is the only way I can save money within the fire department. Be approximately $60,000 to $65,000 savings the first year. And that's assuming that I can get them into an academy and get all 4 members to count as a man with 6 months remaining in the year. I won't know that until I get approval to hire them. And then I can start searching for academies and canvass the individuals on the list. So on the next slide, you will see the comparison. This is the same comparison that I presented in October. There is a slight difference on the 2023. It went down to 59,000. That was today. Angela and I met. That was just some, I believe that was some health insurance costs, some estimated costs that we in October we didn't have the exact figures for. So it's going to be $59,000 savings the first year. No matter what year you just decide to hire the 4 people, the first year is not going to be a huge savings because they don't count right away. In 2024, the savings is estimated to be $260,000. And in 2025, it is $228,000. I only extended it through 2025 because at the end of 2025, the contract's up. I do believe by 2025, the amount of employees that can eligible for retire will double. And I anticipate there'll probably be some retirements.
So 3-year savings you're estimating to be a shade under 560,000.
So yes, the next slide actually gives you that. Over 3 years, it is $562,480.
$500,000.
Next is just the salary line. I don't think much has changed there. Then after that is the actual line by line budget. As I said, this is a bare bones budget. We can go line by line if you'd like, but there's really nothing else I can give off any of these lines. The money savings is through hiring 4 firefighters. And the last slide is just an to explain how we came up with the amount of overtime that's going to be required to run the department with 17 members.
If it were possible, how quickly could you get to 21 to save us the $3 and then?
It would be my recommendation to wait until we get denied the SAFER grant, which I believe the denial letters will be out in December, so it won't affect next year's budget. And then at that point, when we know we're not getting the SAFER grant, because if we hire prior to the SAFER grant and we get awarded the SAFER grant, whoever we hire cannot be used on the SAFER grant. It's not for retention, it's for new hires. So I would wait, which will put us into January regardless. There are two people on the list that I know have enough training that I could count them while we're waiting for an academy. They would still have to go to the academy. It's about a $6,000 a month saving just by hiring those 2. After probably a week of in-service, I could put them on a shift and start saving money immediately. But eventually they will have to go to the academy. The other 2 hires would have to go. They would not count. There would be no benefit to hire them ahead of time, ahead of the academy.
While they're in the academy, they still considered on the city payroll or no?
They get hired and then go to the academy. So yes, that's why for the first year, there's only a $60,000 savings because they're on the city payroll from the time they get hired throughout the academy until they count as a man.
When does the academy run?
So the academy, depending on where we go, traditionally there's one in the spring and one in the fall. I'm looking at possibly the Utica Fire Academy, and they run a spring and fall session. They haven't gotten back to me to confirm that yet. Also, the city of Watertown is looking at hiring also either through the SAFER grant or possibly without the SAFER grant. I've been in talks with the Watertown Fire Chief, and there is a possibility if he hires that he is going to do a in-house academy in the city of Watertown, and our new hires would be allowed to attend, given the only restriction that I would have to teach some of the classes, which I'm fine doing. So that's an option down the road. But until I get approval to hire, I did send out, the city manager has given me permission. So I did send out canvas letters yesterday to the individuals on the list to make sure that we still have an interest. And from there, it'll be up to you. And if or not I hire.
This kind of sounds like a family that can't afford groceries. So you say, go to Sam's Club and buy in bulk, and you'll save money. But you can't afford the groceries to begin with, so you can't afford to buy at Sam's Club in bulk. The city can't afford either one of these. That's the problem.
Well, as the fire chief, I was given the task to give the most efficient way to run this department. And this department is run through the contract. And the only way I can run this department efficiently, financially, is to hire 4 firefighters.
I understand. I understand. But you know, I'm up here representing the city,
and
everybody.
I understand that as well.
That's how I see it. You know, just it's unaffordable for the city, either scenario. That's.
So you don't think we should have a fire department?
Not say that.
No,
I said we can't afford
said
either
you can't afford
scenario.
either scenario, right.
I haven't seen that all along.
It-
With all departments, you know,
So
revenue's not coming in.
if you would like, Mayor,
Yes.
I did do cost analysis from the original proposed budget that was given by the former city manager. And there is a savings to go to a 13-member fire department. It's $25,000. So do you want to save $65,000 and have more people to do the job and not wear my guys out 78 hours extra a month? Or you want to give them 120 hours a month of overtime to save $30,000? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it doesn't make sense to have 5 firemen in the fire station and only 2 police, or maybe 1. I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, that's unsafe for that police officer.
I don't disagree with that at all. I support the
So,
police department
that's what we're
wholeheartedly.
doing, you know? I mean, There's
I
other
support the
departments
police and the fire.
and other safety.
He's still talking.
You got a lot of,
No, I said you
savings
said-
here. You got a lot of, the police department for an extra $130,000 to keep 6 of them. That's my opinion. I think I support
mean-
both the police and the fire.
What does it say to those other departments if, you know, if you hire more firemen and you can't apply the police department? If you can tell me how next year, when costs go up another $1.25 million, how you're gonna make that work? Dan?
We're
I
not
mean,
doing next year.
you always live in the moment. You never look out in the future, and that's what's led us here.
So on the fire department, you're saving over $500,000 in 2 years. So there's.
How are you gonna pay them, just like you hired a police officer? You
So
know,
show me
and
next year's
how are you
budget.
gonna keep that police
Show me
officer
next
working?
year's budget and I'll look at it. Right now, you
You
don't have.
know the cost is going up, you know healthcare is going up, you know retirement's going up, you know payroll's going up,
We don't,
and you know revenue's not.
we don't know that either.
You do too. You did the contracts. How do you not know it if you passed?
Listen, at the end of the day, the contracts are what they are. You know, there's nothing you can do about the past. What you have to deal with is what is in front of us now. And what is in front of us is a potential $500,000 in savings over 3 years.
Yeah.
And it comes at a cost in very difficult times where, quite frankly, the citizens want the services. And that's all I hear. And to shun or to ignore the presentation just given with the savings that are there, with maybe going back and talking to the union and seeing what kind of talks can be done to alleviate the hard decisions that need to be made, which are still going to have to be made. But you can't just compare this to Costco. There are contracts that are not, we're paying through the nose in overtime. This makes no sense to me. None. It hasn't from Jump Street. We're gonna lose the arbitration and we're gonna end up having to pay out more. in
You
the
don't
long
know
run.
that. You don't know
You're
that.
just leading the city in bankruptcy.
I'll bet my paycheck on it.
There's
No.
no bankruptcy.
You're just leading it into bankruptcy.
That's a bunch of
So
nonsense.
here's the fact.
Okay.
There's no way that this can be managed either way. And you know, I mean, there's no way going forward that we're gonna be able to swing this with increasing costs. 14 years, there has not been any revenue increase in this city except for a short time with COVID and sales tax going on. Yeah.
And the fire department has adopted over those 14 years. When I got hired, there were 32 firefighters, 32. We then went to a 30-man. We had a contract that put us to 30. 2 worked in the codes office exclusively. From there, we went to a 28-man contract, which also had hazard pay in it, which actually was the total cost of the individuals that didn't get replaced, which is way more money than what this hazard pay calls for. From there, the last contract reduced the staffing even further to 24. So the fire department has adjusted over the years.
And this city has changed. The population's gone down, industry's gone, tax base has gone down. I mean, the tax base is obviously low. So, I mean, we pay overtime, a lot of overtime to keep 5 men in there. 5-man minimum,
Correct.
okay? So you have 5 men, we're paying overtime, we're paying hazard pay. So why are we having hazard pay when we're paying the overtime?
Because the contract calls for it.
Because contract calls for it. It was given 13 years ago at a different time in the city. And I think, you know, you should be open to negotiate.
Well, I'm not in the union, and I'm not a lawyer. So like I said, the best I can do is present the best financial way to run the fire department. And I believe I just presented it. I'm open to suggestions.
The
But-
additional cost for the overtime and hazard pay and comp, you know, at the end of the year is running $1 million. We lost $2 million in sales tax. And in fire departments costing $1 million more. So there's the $3 million. And I just don't understand when you pay the overtime and you have 5 people in there, why you're still taking both hazard pay.
But you guys created both those crises.
How did we create? We didn't give out
Because
6-year
you
contracts. I never
You got
gave
rid
a
of so
6-man
many
minimum.
firemen that you're paying the overtime.
I really don't see any different than a plumber who charges an extra money to show up on a Saturday morning or a Saturday evening for an emergency call. I mean, it's the same, you expect to be compensated for your inconvenience of having to run your said business. They're being compensated for the inconvenience of working short-staffed. It's really not any different.
Well, why if we're paying overtime, wouldn't the hazard pay drop? Because they've got it both ways. You got a 5-man minimum and they got a 6-man per shift staff cost. You know, and I wasn't on council when these things were given away. You were, and you were the one that, when they were negotiating and wanted a 3-year contract and the city wanted to give them 2-year, after the election, you people gave them 6 years. And here we are. You gave them 6 years,
And if
3,
you looked at the
3,
way they were-
every year, and now we cannot afford it.
Key word was negotiate. And I'll
Well,
tell
what
you
in
the
good faith.
negotiation?
So they
You
gave up.
were.
Don't scream at me because I'll scream back.
Oh, it was going to
You don't want to
arbitration.
hear me scream.
Oh,
So
stop.
we
It went to
had,
arbitration, Dan.
Yep.
It was going to
And we
arbitration, and then the election came, and you guys that were sore losers, and
I wasn't a sore loser.
Oh,
I'm
you know
still
what?
in.
Is this what this is turning into? I mean, because we could go back and forth all god darn night. You know, we're here to talk about the fire department and the budget. And if you're gonna bring up the past, we can bring up the past.
I just wouldn't like that.
Well, so this evening, I believe that we have a hard stop at about 7:15. So I believe that if there aren't any other questions for the fire chief, that council wanted to get through general city services, is that correct?
Oh, I didn't know that. Shoot.
It was on the.
General city services and
Yeah.
possibly recreation. I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to get to recreation given the time constraints this evening, but if there aren't additional questions for fire, the chief did present his solutions for decreasing the cost from the preliminary budget.
And thank
Thank you.
So just a point, since there was an error in the preliminary budget, we have now taken into account the changes to the revenue that were discussed at our first work session and accounting for the correction in overtime. There is a current deficit of approximately $180,000 at this point in time, keeping the cuts that were proposed in this budget and adjusting for the revenue. So just to keep that in mind.
So if we kept that, if we considered hiring 4 men at a savings of 65,000, let's just call it 60 this year, our deficit would then only be 120,000 roughly. Right,
Correct.
give or take. Okay. With a bigger savings next year. Thank you. I just want to keep that in mind.
So general city services,
Yes.
do you want to start with anything in particular? That is everything at City Hall, essentially, from the clerk's office to planning, engineering, and code enforcement.
What was the rationale for increasing the manager's salary by 5,000?
I think we kept what was proposed in line. Let me get to that page.
I'm sorry, Andrea, which ones were you looking at here real quick?
Right now, council is on C4. There was no change on this particular page. This is what you all can set that at whatever you want, I suppose.
Pardon?
You can set that at whatever you want. Ultimately, the decision to hire the city manager would be negotiated with council. Okay. So we can move on. Are there other questions in the city manager budget? All of these budgets are pretty bare bones. We've gone through them as a whole with all department heads giving feedback on how to do things more efficiently. So we can go through each one page by page, line by line, or if there are particular questions or departments that you'd like to focus on. I will say that if we are looking to keep, it's possible that abolishing some of the departments in totality will be required to overcome the deficit, especially if we're looking at putting positions back in that are recommended to offset the deficit. Because the departments are mostly departments of one.
How many positions?
How many positions for what? So the budget right now recommends not filling the deputy clerk position, not filling the planner position. And then there would be 6 cuts in the police department, as well as not filling the 2 retirements in DPW and not hiring the additional proposed position in buildings and grounds. Was that your question?
No, I misunderstood you.
We're not hiring a planner.
That is not proposed in this budget.
You're the city planner, right?
There was an additional planning position for support
Right, that's what I
in
thought.
the budget initially, which was in the 2022 budget, but we were unsuccessful in hiring for that position.
Page C6 and capital. I believe we've advertised for that 2 or 3 times. Have not found anybody.
Still open, right?
That's correct.
But right now we have Angela and 2 account clerks.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we can, budget that for 6 months or not budget it at all. Is that a possibility?
Not budget.
Did you go through the whole year without a finance supervisor this year?
Yes, we did. I was just trying to think. We had 3 in there, other than myself, which I believe that ended in October 2021. So yes, we have been 11 months almost with myself and 2 others.
Yeah, I mean, that's a potential savings there. On the next page, C7, you have 115,000 for consultants.
We do have 115 for consultants, correct?
I'm just wondering what.
Well, I just want to go back to staffing for a minute because Angela's being very polite. One of the items that we're constantly getting dinged on, if you will, is the fact that our comptroller's office really doesn't have adequate staffing to provide the checks and balances, if you will. So I really don't believe that we can do with fewer employees in the comptroller's office.
And I would just add to that.
But we did last year.
Yeah, we did, but we do not have the textbook, I guess, the standard internal controls for segregation of duty. This is going to come up. You'll see it again. That office needs 3 on the floor outside of the comptroller's office working for lots of reasons, capacity as well as segregation of duty.
And they got that on the audit, that we were dinged on that the last audit as well, right?
We did. I think we were able to overcome that in the current year audit. I've talked to the auditor about that situation, but still, Nicole, or Councilor Kennedy, there is several areas in which the internal controls need to be strengthened. And we recently did go through a risk assessment. You're going to see some of these issues come back up. With the staffing level in there, you cannot meet the baseline standard. Okay.
So we can't cut it.
That's where we currently are, safe to assume.
Excuse me?
And that's where we currently are, baseline.
That's where we're proposing to be, the staffing level to meet the minimum standards.
So this is the baseline. Do not cut.
That would be my recommendation, correct. And to your point, Councilor Reach, we could save money for budgeting for 6 months out of the year. But let's say we get a candidate in January, we don't have that money in the budget to pay them until the month of July. Or it's the first 6 months and not the last 6 months. So it's definitely a needed position. I would leave that entire position there for a placeholder in the event that we do receive a suitable candidate for that position. It's a very tight budget, very tight. So if you have a place where we're only using 50% of the money throughout the year, I'm fairly confident that that other 50% could be reappropriated somewhere else. There is truthfully not a lot of wiggle room, if any, in this preliminary budget.
What are the consultants for?
The consultant fees are for the comptroller. Right now, that's a contracted position.
And computer expenses?
That is a portion of the software that is allocated between general, water, and sewer that runs the city's accounting.
How old is that? Software,
Mike?
any idea?
Excuse
So
me?
these are upgrades. This is an upgrade software possibly, maybe?
No, we're on a contract with that software. Heading into the last half of that the city signed up for in 2019. We're close to the end of that contract.
Under assessments, there's also consultants. Page C9.
Yep.
15,000.
Just, if I can, just real quick, Angela.
Can she answer the question first?
So the question is on page C9 regarding the Department of Assessments, regarding consultants. So there are two lines of 515 and 518. 515 are fees paid to St. Lawrence County, and 518 are actual consultant fees. That is the line that we are paying for GAR to do the citywide assessment out of in 2022, and we have budgeted for additional support, specifically with regard to grievances in the 518 line from GAR.
So is that more money going to GAR above their contract?
It's over and above what their contract is for. So their contract is to do the work, to do the reevaluation. This is funding that would support the Board of Assessment review through the grievance process. So if there are questions how an assessment was arrived at, they would be there to provide that level of support. That is an estimated cost. It could be less than that based on, you know, really kind of drilling down on what the city might need. But we do anticipate that there will be more grievances than we had the past few years with a citywide assessment. So this would be some specific support for grievances.
I wonder if it'd be enough. Real quick, back to C7 on the audit, Angela. Is there any movement on the audit?
There is a little bit. I've reached out to our firm yet again, and Counselor Powers, I'll send this in a memo to the city manager, Andrea, the status of that.
Obviously, that's going to come at a little more cost than $3,000 that we currently expended. We budgeted, what, 34 the year before. All right.
Yeah, the budget
you.
is 34,000, correct?
Yeah.
Page C12, the consultant under the law department. Is that hard and fast number? 175,000.
It is our projection based on historic costs. I mean, that's a consulted, it's a contracted professional service. It isn't an employee, so it does go up and down based on the city's needs.
The more you use it, the more it costs.
We did just go by the clerk's office, so I just wanted to reiterate, this budget does not replace the deputy clerk. That position is currently vacant, and it would remain vacant in this proposal. So I don't know if anybody has questions for Kathy about that budget as a whole. But we just kind of skipped over it, so I just want to.
When you talk about departments and like reallocating, like abolishing departments, how would you propose that you propose the departments be put together? Would you do like one department for City Hall? Like, how does that work?
No, I mean, so there are some services that the city provides that are somewhat discretionary. Planning is one of them. So planning, engineering, and recreation really are not required by law or by state statute that you provide. So the city can choose to do those services differently. There are some planning services, for example, that you will be required to provide, assistance to your planning board and zoning board in particular. But you are not required to have a director of planning and development. And certainly abolishing that department is an option for the city, and you can provide the required planning services through a contracted services agreement, a consultant, or another way that may not save money initially, but over time could bring a cost savings. I haven't looked at what that really would entail, but it is something that council may need to consider, especially if you're looking at keeping other departments fully intact, not as depicted in this budget.
The city needs its own planning office.
I'm just throwing out all of your options because quite frankly, you can't keep all of the staff that you have now. There is no way around that. You have to look at reducing your staff. And so I need to tell you that that is an area that you can cut. Again, I'm not sitting here telling you that I know exactly what that looks like, because I think if you close your planning department December 31, you'll have a lot of issues because there's a lot of projects up in the air that are committed to at this point in time. But it is something that the council really needs to think about, because if the solution this year is to use more money out of your general fund, you'll be right back here next year. So if you're thinking about using more funding from the general fund to overcome the deficit for 2023, you need to bear in mind that in 2024, your city hall services have to look different. And it will take all of that timing to have a plan in place for how you will provide those services January 1, 2024. So I hear council wanting to keep fire and police and DPW. So if you want to keep all of those, and I do too, you have to look at city hall staff, which is primarily planning, engineering, and code enforcement. Those will be the areas that you'll have to cut. Those are all shared with water and sewer. So you have to make substantial cuts, which is pretty much the abolishment of departments in order to overcome the deficit that you have. So we can keep going.
It's amazing. No, I just find it amazing how costs go up. If you look at the fire department budget in 2020, it's $3.8 million. You eliminated through attrition, basically, with
Order.
but this year's budget's 3.9 million. That's my point. It's like,
which is my point also. So the city's staffing levels don't align with our current revenue. I hope that our revenue will change to the city's benefit, but at this time, the revenue does not align with your staffing levels. So reducing staffing has to be on the table. And there simply aren't that many retirements. So attrition is great. We don't have that many retirements to work with in 2023.
yeah, I think we need to look at reducing the amount for legal. And that's not our city attorney. That's a separate line.
That is the city attorney.
What is? What's his contract?
Any attorney that is engaged by the city is recorded to that line. So that would be the general city attorney, which is Goldie, Ducharme, and Tom. There's a third name there, I apologize, and Coughlin Gerhardt, they're in that line. So that's any legal services paid by the city are posted there.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember how much Goldie made.
It depends on how much we use him. So he doesn't have a flat contract.
It's an hourly rate.
Correct.
Isn't there a third attorney? Isn't there a third group too? In law, isn't there a third law firm that were used in something?
I mean, I can get you a list of the attorneys that are working on various legal matters for the city if that's what you'd like, Counselor.
Yeah, for some reason I thought there was a third one. So yeah, if there is, yeah, please send it. If not, then, just.
Can we get a list of all consultants as well? Anybody? Yeah, thank you.
How would you eliminate engineering, Andrea, and not have those services?
I mean, so engineering is really probably your greatest bargain. Truthfully, it's shared a third, a third, a third. There's a lot of work in that department that is done for water and sewer. So that's why that's the way most things are here at City Hall. Everybody has a little bit of something to do with water and sewer, and that's why you have to make such drastic cuts in order to really see a difference in the actual general fund budget. So I did not propose abolishing engineering or planning or code. I mean, you're still going to have to provide code enforcement as well, but and those were not proposed in the preliminary budget that I presented. I will really have to think about what that looks like, if that is something that council wants to pursue or wants me to develop a little bit more. I'm happy to do that. It would be very difficult, and truthfully, I think if you're going to look at abolishing any department in totality, we would really probably need to look at how to get it at least 6 months through the year, just to allow for some time to transition. I just wanted to bring it to council's attention that you're going to have to cut somewhere. And if it's not going to be in the places that have been proposed, this is what you're looking at.
And the salaries and the fringes, is that the secretary?
You're in the engineering now? We're done with law.
Yeah. Be nice if we could keep a running tally as to where we are.
So we're on page C14.
What?
C14,
I'm on
C15, I believe.
15
Am I
now,
missing?
so.
Or is there not a C13? Oh, okay, that's fine. I just was scribbling through and I can go back and look.
So I'm sorry, Counselor, your question on C15, right? What?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, so if we contract or use a different outfit for engineering services, why does it show up as salaries with fringe benefits? Is that the secretary or is it?
John,
So
I can barely
engineering-
hear you, bud. Sorry.
Engineering covers, we do not employ a city engineer. We used to. Our code calls for a city engineer. The city has chosen to keep an engineering line, I guess, should you ever choose to hire a city engineer. The technical specialist in this line provides support to planning and public works primarily. It's just accounted for in this budget line, truthfully. So that's a technical specialist position. So that position does quite a bit of work for water and sewer, managing the city's permits regarding the water and wastewater plants, and also provides all of the sort of background administration for grants in support of the planning and public works department.
So the consultant is the engineer.
Yeah, the actual engineering for the city's general engineering purposes is the consultant line in the engineering budget. And that is an estimate every year. We have been reducing that because we try very hard to tie engineering to a project, which is almost always tied to a grant. But in the case when we might need an unforeseen drawing for a water main break or anything, the roof for City Hall, those charges go to the general engineering line, which is in this, as it's the consultant line in this budget. So we've reduced it again, even from what was initially presented. It's very slim at 15,000, but we think it's probably doable.
C16, Did we have 2 custodians at one time or 36 and now what's that about?
So we used to have part-time cleaners, and we moved to a full-time custodian. Shane, you might have the background or history on that decision.
It was the previous city manager's decision. We get reimbursed about 50% of it through the court system. And then 1 day a week or 2 days a week, Mark? Should help you guys. 1 3 days a week, half days, right?
3 hours, 3 days a week, second 9 hours full.
So he gets, and then they lost the custodian at the PD that was part-time. And she spends 3 hours, 3 days a week down there cleaning. And then the court, I think, generates back 50% because she spends 4 hours a day up there cleaning.
So the idea in converting from part-time to full-time is that it does become a much more desirable position. And so you get higher quality staff, one person that is able to do all of the facilities for the city, including police, which does have a higher security requirement. So it has been working out well for us. To be fair, we did look at absolutely every position when putting together the preliminary budget. We did look at whether it would be advantageous to go back to part-time. We think that this still is the best solution for the city. So that is why we proposed it. The most cost-effective and best avenue for the city to get cleaning services for our facilities. I know we talked C18 at the last work session very briefly about central services and the converting and centralizing telephone, printer leases, office supplies into one line, one budget, and that is what you see here, which is why that has gone up. So we did talk a little bit about that, but if anybody has any additional questions, we certainly can address them this evening.
How come in the materials and we've only expended $262 and there was $10,000 in 22 budgeted for materials and supplies, and then we're back to 10,000 again this year? Since, I mean, up to September 30th. It's on C18.
We just carried over the same budget line from prior year. We haven't necessarily used that line particularly, but if you go up above that, we have certainly overspent on the equipment maintenance line. So I hear your point, but it's more of a placeholder should something come up through a city hall central services expense.
It's not
Printing
working.
and advertising is quite different as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
I mean, the previous years, we're not even pushing $10,000 a year. Now we're proposing 20 for printing and advertising.
I think if you scrap both of them, you pick up 30.
Yeah, so this year, we have spent a significant amount of money in printing and advertising because of all of the various openings, everything from the advertising for a fire chief, a comptroller, a city manager. So the advertising budget this year is very high, and with most of those positions still open, we are anticipating additional potential need for advertising for those types of things.
What about the other contractual expenses, 1670 or 498, I should say, 30,000? Can you break down potential or any idea what the other contractual expenses would be? Would that be for printing and advertising or?
It would not be for printing and advertising, but I can, I'm not in front of my computer this evening. I was last budget work session, but I can provide the breakdown of what's been spent in that category.
I mean, there could be service contracts with printers and, you know, I'm not sure, but, you know, or general maintenance for printers or whatever the case may be if a technician needs to come in. But I mean, we barely broached that, you know, halfway mark in 20 and 21.
Right, and year to date, we're a bit closer. We're closer to 50% of that line. So I'll provide a printout of what's in that category.
In that same line, that other contractual, it was 14,000 and 16,000 21, and then 30,000 in 2022. And then actual expenditure through September was only 10,600. So, but we're back up to 30 again. And I mean, that's a couple chunks, 30, 30, and 10.
And I would predict by the end of the year, just kind of doing some rough math, we will probably, sitting here right now, we're almost at 14,000 on that line. We'll probably add another 5, so we'll be at 19,000. That's just an estimate, though.
I'll take it.
I don't know if Chief Stahl's still in the room. Do we have any active firefighters that are potential code enforcement?
All members of the department are building safety inspectors. I am a certified code enforcement officer.
And how many?
I'm sorry, I used the wrong term. That's the old term. They're code compliance technicians. That was a change through New York State.
So you only do
Code compliance technician?
Correct. So their scope of what they can do is limited. We do all business and public assembly inspections. Businesses are every 3 years, which is a $75 charge, and public assemblies is $90, and it is every year.
So how many public assemblies are there? How many?
This year, between public assemblies and businesses, we averaged 6 inspections per individual. So I don't have a calculator in front of me. Myself, I also did them. So 6 times 17 would be the number.
Wouldn't it be more efficient to have like 2 code people in the department, or we train 17 of them?
There's no cost associated with maintaining their training. They get the in-service training, which every individual has, and they are required to get 6 hours of in-service training every year, which as the MTO, I previously used to give them the 6 hours, but with the introduction of COVID, all of the members now get it online, and that seems to be the way the state will be going moving forward. And all members as of 2 weeks ago have already got their 6 hours of in-service while they're on duty. There's no cost to keep them certified whatsoever.
There's a potential savings there to use in code enforcement with our own staff.
Just keep in mind that the code enforcement certification is different than the certification that the chief. So,
Okay. Thank you.
in New York State, code enforcement officials are required to have 24 hours of training. It's different. Not to say that there isn't a way to do things differently. Happy to have that conversation, but there is a different level of training and certification that's required than what the chief just mentioned. He himself is a code enforcement official. officer.
Yeah. codes
Thank you,
we send-
Andrea, for the clarity.
Codes we send to Lake Placid every year to get recertified, right? They have like
Yeah.
2 or 3 day event and everything. So that's not the same with fire.
Well, it's Syracuse or Lake Placid are the closest for their 24 hours of training that is required annually. It's not the 6 hours that the chief is referring to.
So we used to have 4, correct, until the last 2 years, and now we're down to just the chief that were code enforcement officers on the fire department.
So that is correct. Every assistant chief was trained to the level of code enforcement officer, which would be the same level that the 2 code officials have that are in the office currently. And on the 24 hours, there is a 24-hour in-service that we traditionally sent the form certified code officers to. Currently, I am the only one, and I did take the training, but now that I am on days, there was no other than a motel fee. There was no cost associated overtime-wise because I'm scheduled to work Monday through Friday.
So should we schedule the next workshops then before we adjourn for?
I have that on your agenda for November 24th to discuss with you.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Sorry, the 28th. I have it on I have it on the agenda for the 28th to discuss with you. The next several dates for work sessions.
Okay.
My proposal is to do DPW and recreation on the 30th. That's what I was thinking.
I will
That's a
be
Wednesday,
Available on the 30th, but that's fine.
just in an effort to, so, I mean, our date that everybody should keep in mind is the 20th of December, which might seem a little ways away, but it will be here quite quickly. We have regular council meetings on November 28th, December 5th and 12th. We can certainly have additional special meetings after the 12th, but in an effort, I have backed into the 12th. So I have those dates lined out for you, and I don't have them committed to memory, but I know I had thought about, and I had checked with staff for November 30th for DPW. I think I looked at the following week for finalizing any other items that you have for staff, and then a date that I recommend meeting with outside agencies. Keeping in mind that there is no funding for outside agencies in this budget, but most of them, if not all of them, would like the opportunity to come and speak to council and make their pitch to you for why they should be included in the budget. So I have also proposed a date for you to listen to them.
Do we have a workshop in water and sewer?
We can talk about water and sewer along with DPW on the 30th.
Yes, they're all usually normally together.
So I'll have those dates. I can email them out to you this evening. I was planning to talk about them at our council meeting.
Just for everybody to understand and know, December 20th, I'll be having surgery. If council's amenable or can agree to possibly maybe meet the night of the 19th, prior to that, before the deadline approaches, or maybe even sooner than that, who knows, God willing. But just keep in mind that the 20th, I will not be able to attend a meeting on the 20th.
19th is fine with me.
So that's just the deadline. Like I
Yeah.
said, the regular meetings are the 5th and the 12th. It's conceivable that you
Right.
all come to an agreement by the 12th. That'd be wonderful.
Hopefully we do.
But you said November 30th for the next workshop.
That was my proposal. Those are dates that I have given to staff to just sort of make sure that they're available for. That was when I was proposing DPW and recreation, under the assumption we might not get to it this evening.
And while we're talking about that, December 5th, I'll be remote as well. I'll be flying back from a conference into Albany. So I'll be that evening of the 5th on Monday, I'll be remote or possibly late. but I will be landing hopefully by around dinner hour, 5 p.m.
Make a motion for session.
We have to call a meeting. We have to like go through the whole procedure.
Your special meeting actually starts at 7:30.
It starts at 7:30. Yeah, we have to actually go through like we did last night, an actual roll and go through the whole procedure.
So you still have time to talk about planning?
Yes, we do.
If you want, maybe you need a break.
No, that's fine. Let's do it.
So, yeah, we are not proposing, this budget does not keep a planner that was budgeted in 2022. It was initially presented in the budget that you all received on November 1st. It is not in this budget. We did make an effort to hire for that position this year, but the effort was unsuccessful. We did interview some candidates and actually offer the position, but it wasn't accepted. So that position is not filled in this 2023 budget.
So a business planner
That's what we just.
That's the
would
position
be
that's not.
somebody that tries to market the city.
Well, the former city manager and I had different thoughts on what that would be, but essentially it would be a planner that would support the efforts in the planning office, and they would focus more on economic development efforts, working with businesses, working with the Bridge and Port Authority, maybe attending trade shows, those types of things, and also just providing general support for planning. But that is not in this budget.
No,
And I cannot recommend funding that type of position at this point in time.
okay. I think we need to build our revenue, of course. I mean, everybody agrees with that.
Let's jump into C22. Was the professional training at 2,500? Was that possibly for the vacant, the position that you're not going to fill?
No, sir. That is required by law that the city reimburse the fees required for all planning and zoning board members to get their
Okay.
annual training.
Very good. Thank you.
The fees over the last couple years have been much lower than historic numbers, which you obviously don't see because this only goes to 20, because most everything has been virtual and a lot of it has been free. That is really starting to change. We're going back to more in-person training events as well as training events with a fee associated with them. So the city is obligated to pay for the registration fee, material fee, as well as any travel or meal costs that would be required for those members to get that training. That is a cost that you will have no matter what every year. I mean, it's a pretty minimal cost,
Okay.
but
Thank you. The consultant line, noticeable difference from the budget compared to what we've expended. And then, and you significantly dropped that from the 2022 budget for the 2023.
so not unlike comments you heard from the fire chief, this is a reduction made in an effort to balance the budget, foregoing some support for projects that we had talked about doing. That's a line that we've been investing more in, but in this particular budget year, it's a line that we are taking away from.
So that's basically anything that you're looking to get off the ground for any future projects.
It's typically used as the actual services vary greatly. Everything from so a good example is what we just addressed at our last council meeting. So we did a resolution to enter into an agreement with Paradigm to do environmental site assessments at 30 Main Street. We are fortunate, we have a grant right now that's covering 90% of those costs, but we would not have been able to submit an EPA grant without investing in in that phase 2. That is it's called a threshold criteria. So that's a $25,000 cost just to have that, just to be able to apply. Now it's good to have that information because now we know what else we're dealing with. But so it's those types of things that line typically covers. Technical assistance that we might need for a grant or a particular project, things of that nature are covered by that line, and they are usually professional services that are not inexpensive. That's a very good example, $25,000 for that one particular study.
Okay, thank you.
So we have talked, so it does get into public safety, but I guess I do feel like I don't want to keep you right up until your time. So I don't know if you want to get into code enforcement or not.
Yeah, why not? 15 minutes.
We don't have our first, he doesn't actually, we don't call till 7:45.
You just stay here, but I mean, the long and short of code enforcement is that department overall has decreased in staffing. And instead of having a housing inspector and a code enforcement officer and a clerk, we now have 2 code enforcement officers and a clerk. The clerk is shared between the code enforcement office and the Office of Assessment. And quite frankly, the clerk also does a lot for recreation because that's a department we don't have a clerk for either, and we used to have a dedicated clerk. So it is truly an office of 2. It used to be an office of 4. The revenue that we talked about at our last work session is based on having 2 code enforcement officers. The code enforcement officers here at City Hall do the rental inspections, and they do all of the issuing of building permits. So if you were to come in and get a building permit to build a deck, it would be issued by one of our 2 code enforcement officers. We try very hard to have, I advocated for 2 code enforcement officers versus a housing inspector so that we would have backup, so that we would be able to issue building permits and do inspections if we have someone out sick or someone out doing an inspection. So we try very hard. It isn't a flawless system, but to have them in and out at different times so the office is staffed for the benefit of the community who wants to come in and get a building permit. Certainly it is an area where we can go back to having 1, but I will tell you that over the last several years, two things, playing catch up with our rental inspection program, which again, we talked about at our last session. There's quite a heavy lift there. Really, honestly, too much for one person. And again, you're going to look at decreasing revenues. And we will really have to look at adjusting expectations if you want to look at reducing that office in staffing. Right now, we are working hard we've revamped our permitting system so that you can get your permits online more easily, apply for your permits online more easily. We're trying to educate contractors to let them know there's 2 options. There's a fillable PDF option as well as using this portal to do it, both in an effort to streamline it, but to make it easier for contractors to get permits when it's convenient for them. We have an expectation here in the city that a contractor is going to come in and get their building permit 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, all 365 days a year, essentially. So if that's something that the council wants to look at, we do have to look at reducing our revenues, and we will really need to work on adjusting expectations because it will not be possible to provide that same level of service that we have been providing.
They also have a lot to deal with residents and don't take care of the trash.
Yep, absolutely. It's a big quality of life issue that our code enforcement officers are dealing with on a daily basis. The delinquent properties for all kinds of, anything from weeds and grass to people that just want to stockpile garbage on their front porches. So they are the people that are out in the field dealing with those, with support from the police office and other departments as well. DPW provides assistance in securing vacant properties and so on and so forth. But that is definitely a big part of what they do and something that we have been doing more of over the last 2 years.
Could you go over the consultant line, 515?
In the code budget?
Yes, please. I'm on D13.
Yeah, so that is a budget line that is specifically for demolition of condemned structures. Right now, we have 2 properties that are on, they're both city-owned properties that are residential structures that are condemned and in a very poor state. We had initially budgeted the actual demolition costs based on bids from contractors in the budget that was presented on November 1st. This has the cost as we know them in the last month for one of those demolitions. They are both in very, very poor condition. I expect that there could be collapse of portions of one, if not both of them, over the winter, depending on the snow that we get. So I really thought very long and hard and talked with our code enforcement officers about how we could reduce that line further. I don't think that that is a good recommendation. So we've reduced it as far as I really feel comfortable. Again, that is to address essentially an emergency demolition.
What of the 2022 modified budget of 521,000?
So that we did a series of demolitions in this past year, not just 212 Ford Street, but multiple residential structures, 7 Brown. I think I gave a report on that recently.
Yeah. So, but we haven't expended any of it as of 9:30.
Yeah, so
we have expended money. You've got to kind of take a look at 515 and 518 as a combined total. The total budget between those 2 lines is 623,000. As of 9:30, we had spent 203,000. And year to date, that number has grown yet again. So the money is getting expended. When the bills are being coded, they're being coded to the 518 line and not split between the 2. So we just would look at that in the aggregate of both lines.
We get a breakdown of that?
I can provide that, sure.
I know, like Andrea just mentioned, that there's some of them are already in there, but I mean, especially as in light of some of the, the newer billing that's coming in. I mean, just to see what if anything may be left of that 521,000.
So to answer that, year to date, we have spent, I'm going to round it, 370,000. There's, I would assume, more invoices to come before year end.
Well, if we have any contracts with any demo teams, let's get an idea as to what they're looking like. And
we're on track for having that pretty well closed out. I mean, save for anything that I'm not expecting right now, because we were just in the process of processing the final payment on the 7 structures demolitions that we did. So that will come out of there. That also does cover when we have to go in and do a trash removal for a code violation. Sometimes those are paid back because they're re-levied on the property taxes. They don't always come back, but those are also covered in that, as well as boarding up and securing of properties that the city forecloses on. So it's 7:25. You got through quite a bit more than I expected, so nice job. If there aren't any other questions, I think we'll conclude budget session number 2. Great, thank you.
So we'll open the meeting. Good evening and
Mayor.
thank you for
We have to
attending.
wait till 7.
No, it's just